Hi everyone, happy to be here today. We're going to be talking about how to navigate today's paid media landscape and what that looks like in the digital age. Wish we could be there in person, but virtually is going to have to do, just like a lot of different things this year. At the end of this, you'll receive a deck version of this presentation, so that way you don't have to worry about jotting down everything that we say as we go, but you'll have all the material available to you as well. I'm Melissa Daulton, Paid Media Director here at Defero.
And I'm Clyde Sedgwick, our Chief Agency Officer. And just a half second of background on Defero. Defero is a full surround integrated marketing agency, and we help our clients with all aspects of their brand in the digital age. So today we're going to be talking about paid media, but we help clients on many different levels. Defero was founded back in 2006, and the important thing about that as it relates to our background is that we were born in the digital age. We were from the foundation up, starting in digital. So other folks out there sometimes have started in traditional and moved into digital, but Defero was really starting in email and other aspects of digital marketing and has been in it ever since. Headquartered here in Phoenix, Arizona, and Reno, Nevada. And as far as services we provide our clients, it really is a full 360-degree surround of those types of things that folks need. So whether it's social media and influencer marketing, to web and application development, to email marketing and other things, we work with all the different aspects of digital media. And again, today being paid, the relevance there is that all these things can play together and should play together. We feel very strongly about that. So time allotments today will focus on some paid media, but a lot of our background is in various elements of all this, and it brings it all to some of the things we're going to talk about today. So specifically in the digital marketing mix, there are really three main areas that kind of overlap. Earned is something where we'll talk about earned media, where you're getting reviews or media coverage or mentions, social shares, influencers that are posting things. But basically, we are not paying for the extra coverage or the extra marketing benefits that are happening out of those things, but it's just earned. It's things that you're doing that other people are picking up upon. So owned, on the other hand, is something obvious because that's stuff that you own and you're paying for it with internal resources and services and infrastructure that you have. So whether it's your website or a blog or social channels or an email newsletter that you're doing, those things are things that you own. Today's focus is on paid. So paid as a separate marketing part of the marketing mix is the pay-per-click elements of things, display ads, remarketing, paid social, paid influencers as opposed to influencers who might just pick up your things in the earned column. But everything around the paid side where you're dealing with budgets, focusing on things that you're going to have to pay for as it relates to marketing are the topics that we'd like to talk about today.
And to that point, we have three core pillars of our presentation. So first, we're going to talk about identifying your target audience. That's an important first step in any paid media buying that you're going to do. Next, we'll talk about what channels to activate and what might make sense for your audience. And then lastly, we'll kind of end it all on how to optimize and measure success of your campaigns to make sure that it's working for you and that you're getting the results that you want to see.
Very key. It's never set it and forget it type of thing. So all three of these are key kind of buckets, but that optimize, measure, and success, very important.
So starting with our target audience and how we identify them, this is where you probably have a good feel already of who's buying your products, who's in the market to buy your products. That's the reason that you're in business. However, when it comes to putting together a paid media plan, there's some additional factors that are helpful to outline to be able to make sure that you're targeting properly through the channels that we're going to discuss. So there's a few key factors here. So when we come to the demographics, so the who is your audience, the why they buy, so the psychographic and interest information, and then how they consume content and their online behaviors. So marrying those three things together is really what helps define your target audience, and we'll talk a little bit more about each of these.
And a key thing that can also be important about identifying your audience is you might assume or think that you know who your audience is, but it's always good to take a step back when you're starting to spend money in these paid channels and really think about it from a perspective of timing. Some of the things we'll talk about here, but truly taking a step back in this section, we'll talk about, again, these three things, the who, why, and how. But if you step back and really kind of map it back out, write these things back down, define it for this particular initiative that you're doing, it'll really make your plan much more successful.
So when we're talking about the demographic information, those are the objective factors. So these are things that you can definitively say about your audience. Some of them you can use to target on paid media platforms, some of them you can't. But really looking at who this person is from this lens will help with some of the straightforward elements, a little bit more quantifiable, objective, less subjective, like the psychographic and interest information that we'll talk about next. When we get into the why these people are who they are, what characteristics make up their personalities, there's a bunch of different things that you can look at. So if we're talking about things like purchase behavior, interests and hobbies, life events, those are tangible examples that will show you, why they might be buying certain types of fashion products, why they might be interested in these types of activities that they're spending their free time on. And when it comes to life events, especially when someone's newly engaged or if they're a mom with kids, that's definitely going to change the types of things they might be purchasing in the near future. So it's important to take all of these things into consideration and use them to your advantage when you're targeting your paid media. That way you can get as close to home as possible.
And we know that some of you guys might be small shops, 1 to 3 people, let's pretend, type organizations. Some might be very large. But all of these things, as it relates to when you're going out and actually spending money in the paid media channels, think about these things, again, to seasonality. Somebody might be in a fashion conscious area, in cold weather, in warm weather, in the East, back in the West, all those types of things of what someone's doing on their side that you're trying to target with your paid dollars as the why aspect of the psychographic and the interest that they may have. But a lot of those things will be different throughout the year and different based on your size of organization. Are you national? Are you local? All of these things are something you should step back, really think about as it relates to the paid media efforts that you're about to pursue.
And then we want to talk about how these consumers behave online. What content do they consume? Where do they consume it? There's a variety of both digital and traditional platforms. And these are things that we use every single day as consumers without really realizing this is the reason we're using these channels. So anything from email to surfing blogs on the web to social media platforms to watching TV or reading the newspaper. These are all arenas that people are consuming content and generally ways that us as advertisers and marketers can reach them. So these are where we want to start considering what channels might be applicable for our audience and understanding how they behave so we know where we can place our media to reach them. When you take the who, why, and how and marry those 3 together, that's really the core foundations of your target audience. Like we started with at the beginning, it's important to define this up front without just jumping into a media platform to start advertising right off the bat. So it's important to take a step back, like Clyde said, and look at what characteristics will make up your target audience, and that way you can get off on the right foot.
Absolutely. Yeah, so they're basically, in this roadmap process, again, we've been talking about, we're going to look at these 3 different pieces. We're going to bounce into the actual media channels here in a second. But again, that planning of the audience per campaign, can't say it enough. That's going to change throughout your plans as you go through and target different aspects of your spend, where you're going to focus, et cetera, et cetera. But moving into the next section, the activation of these different channels and platforms, there are a ton of them. So we're going to look at basically just a few different things today as it relates to some of the different places that we can play with different parts of our channels and platforms. So basically here, we can see there's a ton of different options, and we'll kind of cover each of these on a very high level, but really you could have all-day seminars on each one of these types of things. So our goal here will be just to kind of high level discuss some of the specifics that you could play with as it relates to where these channels could impact some of your marketing.
Yeah, so starting with paid social media, there are tons of options that you could activate. It helps broaden your reach, get in front of the right audience, and each channel really offers their own unique benefits and why you might want to use it. Overall, 45% of US fashion shoppers say they hear about new brands and products that they might consider buying through sites and apps they use on their mobile devices. So social media is heavily mobile. It's always at our fingertips, basically. So understanding what channels your audience is most likely to be on would be very helpful in order to kind of narrow down that social sphere, essentially, because otherwise there's so many options to choose from. So from a paid perspective, we'll talk a little bit more about a couple key channels. So Facebook and Instagram being one. They actually share an ad platform. So from a consumer perspective, we see those as different channels, but from an advertiser's perspective, we see them as one aggregate level platform that we can utilize and really gain efficiencies with the media that we're placing there. So they offer a variety of different ad placements and content placements that you can really leverage to your benefit as it relates to what types of results you're trying to see, whether you're trying to get someone to purchase, whether you're trying to gain awareness, whether you're trying to get more brand recognition. There's a lot of different ways you could look at what to place there and have it be effective for you. So 72% of US fashion shoppers say at least one form of personalization increases their likelihood of making a purchase. And that's really important because for Facebook and Instagram specifically, there's a lot of personalization options to make it feel like it hits close to home and that you're actually speaking to that individual consumer versus just speaking to the masses.
Yeah, key point.
And then another key channel would be Pinterest. So knowing that this is a highly, discoverable, inspirational type platform, this is where people go for, looking for that next outfit for a job interview, or where they're looking for what they might want to wear for their wedding. So, across the spectrum of life events, Pinterest is a source of inspiration, and it's very helpful in planning and what, that purchase and consumer journey looks like. So again, can't express enough that it's a place that in-store shopping and online behaviors kind of marry, and knowing that people will go there to plan ahead of time and then make purchases after the fact based off of what they've seen and liked.
Yeah, especially important to the apparel and bow industries and what you guys are in these days, because people pinning boards and creating ideas and coming back later to follow up on certain things. Pinterest is a big one. Not all of our clients in other arenas are necessarily focused within Pinterest because of other things, but in the planning and specifically in your guys' worlds, big area of opportunity. So I can take this one, the paid search aspect of things. So in general, obviously paid search is you're paying to be found when people are searching, right? Base definition. But the real important part here that we've got on this slide is the intent aspect of it. So paid search is when we're paying to be found when someone is typing something in, which means they have intent. So they're going to the internet, they're going to Google. There could be other platforms obviously as well for search, but really the reality check is it's Google. And so if people are going into the Google system and typing something in to search for wedding dresses, fashion trends, whatever that might be, when they're typing certain things in, their intent is very high. So there are some segments within that, but that's really the key takeaway here, where paid search is worth your money, is when you're trying to find folks that are looking for something specific.
When we're looking a little bit more into what those segments of intent are, you have a couple different types of users. So when we're looking at someone who's researching, they're just starting their journey. They kind of don't know where to begin, and they're going to the search engine to be able to find solutions. They might not know what they're looking for yet, but their hope is to find it. And then when you're looking at a prospect, that's someone who's narrowed down their consideration set a little bit. They have a little bit more focus on what they're looking for, and they might be closer to making that type of conversion decision purchase. And then a customer would be someone who has completed the prospect journey and made that conversion directly. So they might be trying to repurchase or go back for more information, something to that effect. And then an at-risk customer would be someone who's unhappy with their current solution. So they're trying to find a different solution for something that they've already experienced. So whether that be an outfit that they didn't like, a pair of jeans that didn't fit, a cut that didn't work for them, they're going to find something else that's going to be better. Transitioning here into influencers, so very topical as it relates to the space that we're in now. Influencers has just continued to grow, and at its most simple form, an influencer is someone who influences others. What that sphere of influence is can vary greatly depending on the size, the scale, the types of influencers. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in the coming slides, but something to keep in mind when it comes to working with influencers is authenticity. That's really important, becoming more and more important as folks really want to trust who they're following and really believe in what they believe in. So that's an aspect that is really important from a marketer side, to be able to take a step back and evaluate, is this person a good fit for our brand as a whole? And how is that going to translate to their audience? Interesting note here, probably not surprising, but 55% of US shoppers who follow fashion influencers say they've purchased a fashion-related item after seeing an influencer promote it. So we're seeing that direct, influence come out and play as it relates to purchase. And talking a little bit more about the calibers of influencers, this is a good graphic slide to kind of outline how things, the state of the landscape today, how things have evolved. So, you could have someone who has a couple hundred followers, a couple 100,000 followers, a couple million followers, and they all kind of serve different purposes, and of course come at different kind of budget, considerations and things that we need to take into consideration when choosing them. So if you're looking for someone who's more day-to-day, everyday consumers, you're looking at kind of the advocate and micro level versus someone who might be macro or mega, almost like a celebrity. Influencers have turned into celebrities, so that's another aspect of things as well. And then understanding what their audience size means. So if you have someone on the smaller side, they may be more connected with their audience on a regular basis, whereas someone on the larger side would be able to have more mass reach and be able to, get the word out a little bit quicker, a little bit wider, a little bit faster. And then that parlays into what the influencers are best suited for. So that's something where if you want to map out what you're trying to achieve with this, then you can look at what types of people you might be looking to help you get there.
Yeah, and this is a great slide in an overview fashion. One other aspect of this is whether you're a local market or you're national or something in between, regional focus, the types of things you guys are doing, whether it's apparel or vow. The influencer market is very important as it relates to that. So if you're a local market, you're a smaller shop in some region, and you find local influencer things, it could be artists, it could be other folks that are kind of, the celebrity in town, but not necessarily a national celebrity. Those can be folks that are great as it relates to connecting to your brand, versus if there is somebody that is more national based, or somebody that has a very broad base when it comes to even some of these smaller influencers, but their base is broad as it relates to, let's pretend, followings in Instagram or other channels, then those might be things to think about. So think about who your influencers are as it relates to the size of your market and what your designs are for going after particular audience types.
Absolutely. And then looking at how to find these influencers, that's a whole nother conversation on its own, probably. But there's a couple different ways, at the highest level that you can go about it. So the first would be manual, organic research, digging through social channels, looking for people who are posting hashtag ad, hashtag sponsored, for the types of posts that you're kind of looking to replicate. And then the second would be a self-service platform. So what that does is aggregate, the influencers into a pool for you to kind of select, filter, choose from. So it really helps cut down on that research time, but you're still ultimately, doing a lot of legwork yourself. And then when it comes to working with an agency or media provider, that's where it's a little bit more hands-off, more of a managed service. You would still have inputs, more than likely on everything that's going to be happening, but they would do the legwork for you. So it kind of depends on where you're at, the types of scales you're looking for, but the vast majority of influencers, even some of the smaller ones, actually have agents that they work with. So at the end of the day, a lot of times you're not even working with the influencer themselves, you're working with a liaison to help facilitate the engagement you're looking to have.
Yeah, great slide there, in that, a lot of times people are interested in pursuing influencers, but it's like, how do you even find them? So good stuff.
Next, we're going to talk about programmatic media. So what this really means is data-driven audience targeting at the end of the day that can manifest through a variety of placements and ways that you see it as an end consumer. So programmatic targeting allows us to really dive into what makes up, back to our target audience, what makes them unique and where we can best reach them. So like we said, you'll get a copy of this presentation afterwards, so lots of information here, but a couple key targeting points just to cover would be behavioral targeting, understanding how a user behaves online, how that translates to purchase intent, and connecting those. So that way you can take their behavior and turn that into a targeting capability. Another would be site retargeting. And what that means is retargeting, remarketing to people who come to your website and knowing that they're more likely to convert because they've already interacted with your brand in some way. We'll talk a little bit more about that later as well, but super important in the mix to consider.
And also geofencing, for instance, is another good one where, you can focus again, back to my local market kind of conversation or whatever there, but in some of the platforms and depending upon what you're trying to do, having a specific region or area, what we call geofencing, that you're trying to play, but 1,000,001 options here.
When we look at what these types of ads look like, you probably see them, interact with them all the time, and how you're being targeted to receive them is what changes behind the scenes that most people, would never understand why. So from a consumer perspective, you see these types of ads. From a marketer's perspective, we place those types of ads. So looking at native video or display, for example, that's something where the content is native to the other content it's within. So you're reading an article, something is in there that's actually an ad, but it feels very natural to what's happening on the page already. And then you have banners, and that could be an interactive banner, it could be a static banner. That's something that's usually more off to the side, below. It's not, directly in the content itself. And then something like connected TV, where that's actually a digital placement, feels really big because it's on your TV screen, it's coming through a streaming service, but it's actually something that we can highly target, and it's not just broad DMA type targeting. And talking about streaming a little bit more, another aspect would be streaming audio. So takes a more traditional, platform like radio and brings it to the streaming world where we can have heavy programmatic targeting, reach people, in a different way. So there's a lot of visual advertising, and this one's interesting because it's audible. It kind of hits a different part of the senses. So everything from, all the programmatic targeting aspects that we've already talked about to also what types of music people listen to can play into how you reach them here. And a lot of streaming subscriptions are actually, served with ads. A lot of people leverage the free services. So that means that there's a wide audience pool to reach these people through. And then again, another kind of traditional tactic turned a little bit more modern would be digital out of home. So you're probably familiar with seeing billboards, but the digital out of home, digital billboards aspect is relatively new, and it allows us to have a little bit more targeting as it relates to who you're trying to reach, as well as how you can reach them after they see one of your digital billboards. So that means, they see something one time, you can follow up with an ad on their phone or something to that effect. And this is very important for local regional plays, knowing where your target audience is able to shop for you. This is a great way to reach them in that vicinity. I said we'd circle back on cross-channel retargeting. Here we are. As you're reaching people through a variety of different mechanisms, it's important to reach them more than one time. So that's where we want to make sure that if someone's seeing a Facebook ad coming to your website, that you're able to then use that to reach them on another platform. So as you'll see, website visitors who are retargeted are more likely to convert by 43%. That's because they've already expressed an interest in your brand, and it just might be a little bit more of a nudge that they need to make that purchase or conversion. They're a warmer lead. They're someone who you've already reached once, so it'll be more efficient to reach them again and get them to purchase.
Yeah, so this is where the marketing side of the internet has gotten scary, right? We search for a pair of shoes or a great belt or something along those lines, and all of a sudden, the next thing you see in your Instagram feed is that exact same pair of shoes or belt that you might have seen or over in Facebook or over in some other channel, or you're listening to your, Pandora station, and poof, there's somebody talking about that exact topic that you were searching. So cross-channel retargeting is a great aspect from a marketing sense, in that we can truly try and reach consumers that had some interest in something in some of the other platforms that they're in. So basically, that's the second aspect of what we wanted to talk about today. So first, again, was identifying the audience, then very, very briefly talking about some of the different channels and platforms. Again, those could be day-long seminars, week-long seminars on some of them. But what we wanted to wrap up with is the optimize and measuring success, and basically talk about some of the specifics in this area.
So as we kind of started off with, it's very important to have a plan from the beginning, rather than just jumping into a paid media channel and starting to spend money, making sure you take a step back, develop that plan, and use that to optimize as you go through. So we also mentioned paid media is not a set it and forget it type tactic. It's something that requires, constant improvement, and it'll only make your success stronger. So when you're looking at the types of things to consider, everything from the creative, the messaging that you're sharing, what the images look like, what your tone and brand, voice is, and how that comes through in the advertising that you're doing, all the way down to what you're, retargeting with, how that message might change, and everything in between. So we've covered a variety of information here as it relates to the audience, the placements, the objectives that you're trying to achieve. And it's important that, those things change over time, and we need to make sure that we're optimizing the media so that way it improves over time as well. When it comes to measuring success, again, going back to having a plan is important, and determining what your KPIs or key performance indicators are going to be. So with that, there's different metrics that we'd look at to measure how successful something is. And that can kind of vary based off of the type of objective we're trying to achieve, and whether that's more top of funnel, brand awareness, getting the word out, more middle of funnel where someone might be considering, and bottom of funnel where someone's making a purchase or converting. So within that, there's various metrics that we can use to measure how successful something is. And it's important to evaluate what you're trying to achieve and know what you're mapping towards.
Yeah, so whirlwind tour here, but the most important part coming out of the optimize, measuring success is you need to do a ton of testing. As Melissa said, it's not a set it and forget it exercise. You cannot just, we would highly counsel that you don't go into some arena trying to spend something and just see what happens. You need to really monitor, measure, and stay on top of something. It's another aspect of something we counsel all of our clients in any one of these channels. If you don't have the time, the energy, the budget to truly go after something, you're probably best holding that budget and time and resources until you can focus on that. So the optimizing is things of, changing your creative, what we call A/B testing, but trying one thing, trying another. Sometimes internally at the agency, we have competitions and jokes about which ad creative we think is going to win out, and surprisingly often it's not the one we might have assumed. So truly dealing with that from an optimize and measurement perspective, thinking about what you're trying to track, making it a strategy as opposed to just a shotgun approach is really key as a wrap up to these three main things that we wanted to talk about today. So one of the other things, in a live session, we'd have some frequently asked questions, or we'd have questions and answer type sessions, but we wanted to throw out a few things that we thought might be frequently asked. And even though we're in the virtual setup, to try and cover a few things, got a couple of them here for us. So one of the first ones is, where do I start? All of this stuff can be, numbing when it comes to thinking about, where you are with all of your processes. We tried to give you, three kind of main sections, but where do you start? It really isn't all that planning. It's really looking at, what sort of budget do we have? What sort of resources do you have? What sort of bandwidth are you going to be able to, follow up on these pieces? What are we trying to do with our audience? How do we really get started within the right approach to things? So really the where should I start is in that foundational pieces, kind of vague, answers to some of these things. I think we'll talk about all of them kind of having generalities around them. But in general, where do you start? It's with a solid plan, organized structure, go at it methodically.
And then another question would be, what channels should I prioritize? And again, that kind of comes back to who your target audience is. The two factors here to consider: who your target audience is and how much budget do you have. So some channels are easier to activate on a smaller budget. And if that makes sense for where your target audience is, that's probably where to start. Other channels might require a little bit more investment in order to see success on the platform specifically. So those are things to evaluate. And again, as Clyde mentioned, there's some generalities here because it really does depend on what you're trying to achieve, who you're trying to reach, and what your business is. So everything is a custom approach to what you're doing.
Another one might be how much budget do I need to spend? And that can be something that is dictated by the platform. So sometimes some of the larger things that you might do might have a minimum spend across something in order to move on some particular thing that you're thinking about or platform that you want to play within. So organizing a game plan around the budget and how much you're going to be able to afford to spend, and then working through what the platforms would require. Sometimes what we call the auction dictates that. So within many of the platforms, it's literally an auction behind the scenes. So if I want to go find something around a particular type of apparel or a particular aspect of a wedding, the amount of money that you need to spend to go find a placement against that would be dictated by the platform and by the auction. Everybody else in the world is trying to find the same thing. They have more money than we do. Guess what? We have to back up and decide, what budget do we really have? Where do we think that budget could be spent against some traction and some efforts that we think would be valuable? Maybe we need to change the types of things we're going after, and that's not just wedding dresses, but it's a particular style, it's a particular region, it's a particular thing that you have that's unique about your wedding dresses or your line of apparel or your approach to things. So how much do you need to spend is going to be very different as it relates to the platforms that you want to focus on, and kind of pick those out first that you think might be relevant. And then sometimes that helps you dictate how much you really need to spend in order to make some traction and literally show up where you want to show up.
And then how long does it take to see results? So everyone wants to see results quickly, of course. And again, this kind of depends on what results we're trying to see. So if we're trying to get more awareness, get more eyeballs on your brand, that's something that can usually happen relatively quickly. Again, budget's a scale factor there, can move things along quicker or slower. But if you're trying to get someone to make a bigger purchase, like a wedding dress, back to that example, that might take a little bit more research, a little bit more nurturing, big decision, something that's a infrequent purchase. Would also be different than someone who might be buying a new pair of shoes or a pair of jeans. They might be more apt to make that purchase happen faster. So again, when we're defining what results are, there's a wide spectrum, and how long it takes to see them is kind of a variable based off of those different types of considerations.
And our last little frequently asked question here is, how do I know if my advertising is working? Basically, the short answer to that is tracking. So you need to figure out if you have an e-commerce site and you can see exactly where the dollars are spent in advertising all the way through to the conversion at the end of the checkout process for something online. Very honestly, great for you. Make sure that all those tracking elements are set up, because that makes life easy. Where it's much more difficult is sometimes you're dealing with trying to deal with brand recognition or get things out at a higher level. You'll hear advertisers talk about lift and engagement and things of that nature. They become a little bit more of the soft, fuzzy aspects of tracking of things. Obviously, as advertisers and marketers, we really want to know for every dollar in, what's really coming out of it. And don't let yourself be limited in that. Think about, how do I measure if I have a storefront and I have customers walking in over the last several months? What have I seen in traction this time of year, year over year, when it's seasonality? What do I typically see? Now, if I go out and spend X amount of dollars on these particular resources, am I seeing a lift in that foot traffic, to exaggerate, or cash register, at the desk type of thing? So how do you measure it? It can vary, obviously, depending on what options you have available to you and how detailed your tracking can be, but you absolutely need to, one way or another. In our opinion, it's just not good enough to say that I'm going to throw money at advertising and hope that we see some activity, or we do happen to see some activity and we're just going to attribute it to the advertising. Today's day and age, you can definitely get into more refined aspects of really tracking whether it's working or not based upon your metrics that you can see.
And these are just 5 questions. I mean, there's so many questions that we have, and this is just 5 of them. So there's a variety of things we could go down, and like Clyde's mentioned, we could have entire day seminars on these types of topics.
Yeah, we had limited time here today, but we did want to share some thoughts on this topic, and really have appreciated your guys' time getting to the end of this presentation. It's always weird when things are remote, but it's the world we're living in right now. And if there are any further questions or things that we can do for you, again, you guys will get this deck directly. So if there's anything that we can help you with, answer any questions, we'd be happy to. Feel free to reach us through any of these aspects here on screen. Thanks so much for your time.